Good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone to this special briefing for Members of Parliament, which is part of a series of virtual briefings with the support of Wilderness Foundation Africa and ICCF. As always, a special welcome and thank you to the honourable members who have a particularly busy day today, so thank you for joining us. And a big thank you to the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, the Honourable Tasa, for hosting this briefing. And welcome, as always, to everyone joining us via YouTube. There is no question that the plastic pollution is having a devastating effect on our natural environment. South Africa is ranked 11th on the global list of the worst offenders regarding plastic pollution in the ocean. According to WWF, in South Africa, over 80% of marine pollution originates from land-based sources, and only 16% of plastic gets recycled. Sadly, 8 million metric tons of discarded plastic end up in the ocean every year from South Africa. I think we've all seen the heartbreaking pictures of whales dying from starvation because they had swallowed 40 kilograms or more of plastic bags, or sea turtles with plastic earbuds stuck in their noses. And even on land, we have often heard of the plastic bag being referred to as the national flower of our country. Recently, Minister Creasy announced some strong regulations in terms of recycling and pollution control. But is it enough? So we thought it would be useful to look at examples on this continent where countries have taken some drastic and visionary steps in curbing plastic pollution. And we are therefore honored to have two experts in this field who will each give us a short input, about 10 to 15 minutes each, after which we will give the MPs, as usual, the opportunity to ask questions. So our first speaker today is Her Excellency Professor Judy Wakhungu, who is joining us all the way from Paris, a cold, dark Paris, I believe. Ambassador Wakhungu is Kenya's ambassador to France, the Holy See, Monaco, Portugal, and Serbia, so busy woman. She's the former Minister of Environment, Water and Natural Resources of the Republic of Kenya, and as such, she presided over some of the seminal legislation, which included, amongst others, Kenya's Wildlife and Conservation Act, the Climate Change Act, Kenya's Water Act, and legislation, importantly, banning single-use plastic in 2017. She is the recipient of the Ocean Award and the Clark R. Baven Award. Thank you so much for joining us, Your Excellency, and I pass over to you now.
Can you hear me now?
We can. Welcome.
Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed, Chair, honorable members, ICCF and other distinguished panelists. What I would like to do this morning, given everybody's very busy schedule, is not to make a speech per se, but just to give you a few comments about the experience of Kenya with plastic pollutants. As you all know, in Kenya, just like everywhere else in South Africa and everywhere else in the world, plastic pollutants are a huge, huge menace. They're in our water, they're in our air particles, they're in our rivers, they're in our oceans, they're in our dump sites. We use them every day, but we also don't know how to discard them. They're hosts to many, many other contaminants. The biggest issue for us in Kenya, like everywhere else in the world, is that we found ourselves, interestingly enough, addicted to this very, very durable material. And it is a durable material. And what plastic is durable because it lasts for forever. It lasts for 400 to 1,000 years, depending on what type of plastic it is that you're using and for what purpose. So although it is useful, it's useful in the health sector, it's useful in hygiene, it's useful as a durable material, but unfortunately, we don't yet have the science of how to cope with it. In terms of the Kenyan landscape and the Kenyan perspective, we found ourselves in a very peculiar and unusual situation. Unusual situation because waste management in Kenya is not that advanced. In other words, our waste management situation needs improvement. What did this mean? It meant that in terms of aesthetics, everywhere you were driving, everywhere in our neighborhoods, all we could see was plastic strewn all over the place. And as the chair mentioned, in some places in Kenya, we were even referring to it as our flower, because it was all over the trees, all colors, pink, blue, green, and so on. One of the worst situations, of course, is that many of our communities are pastoralists. So many of our communities rely on their livestock. Our livestock were also now beginning to consume these plastics. And in many of our abattoirs, the owners of the abattoirs would complain that, you know, every single day when we slaughter the animals, what we're finding in the lumen is kilos and kilos of plastics. And of course, we know that if the animals are consuming these plastics, then naturally we as human beings ourselves are consuming the plastics. In terms of our fisher folk and the marine culture, these were also not spared, simply because the fisher folk would also find that many of our fish were also consuming these plastics, so which also meant that we were consuming them as well. To make it worse, in terms of drainage, many of our drain pipes also were being clogged by plastics. Many of our waterways were also being contaminated by plastics. So what did Kenya try to do in order to try to deal with this pollutant? Kenya has tried to deal with plastic pollutants for many, many, many years, many years. I came on board as Minister of Environment, Water, and Natural Resources in 2013. And one of my promises to Kenyans was that we would definitely do our best to deal with this plastic pollutants. Now, it's easier said than done. Easier said than done simply because, of course, the lobbies are very, very powerful. And the lobbies, I mean the manufacturers, are very, very powerful indeed, because, of course, this is part and parcel of our industrialization, part and parcel of our trade, part and parcel of our hygiene. But we were determined to do so simply because we could already see the health hazard. We could already see that our environment was being contaminated, and that also meant that we, as human beings, our health was also being compromised. Now, just very quickly, in terms of environment and health expectations for Kenyans, and this is just simply the Kenyan context. In our constitution, and our constitution is the Kenya Constitution 2010, Article 42 states very, very clearly that it is the right of Kenyans to have a clean and safe environment. Article 69 of the Constitution also promises that all Kenyans must also play their part in ensuring that they have a clean and safe environment. So, as part of my pledge as Minister responsible for the environmental health of Kenyans, I pledged to ensure that our environment was clean and our environment was safe, not only just of plastic pollutants, but also other pollutants as well, for example, lead and so on. So we started on this journey, which was not very easy, but we started on this journey and we were determined to do so. And I think the honorable members of parliament that are panelists today will appreciate to understand that I had a lot of support from the Environment Committee of the National Assembly. I also had a lot of support from the Senate Committee. Kenya, of course, is bicameral. So we have the National Assembly and we have the Senate. For any policy to pass or any piece of legislation to pass, it has to be approved by this bicameral situation, which is both the Parliament, the National Assembly, and the Senate. Fortunately for Kenya at this time is that we had the Environment Committee, particularly of the Parliament. Members were about 28, but fortunately for us, about half of them were actually professional environmentalists themselves before they embarked on their political careers. So I did have a lot of support for them. Of course, I had a support from the executive, and then also support from my colleague, Minister of Industrialization, because of course, all the manufacturers, all of the industrialists fell under his sector and his docket. We also had a lot of activists in Kenya. And sometimes when we use the word activist, it's perceived negatively. But, you know, in this case, the activists were extremely positive and very determined to see that we get rid of these plastic pollutants. But also concerning the manufacturers themselves, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers also has a very strong committee, and it's actually a plastics sector committee. Now, this plastic sector committee was divided almost in half for those industrialists that were pro the plastics sector, but there were also some of them that were interested in the alternatives, that were interested in promoting biodegradables, that were interested in promoting compostables as well. We had a long-standing committee between the Ministry of the Environment, the National Environment Management Authority, what we call NEMA, and also with a task force of the manufacturers. They had met for many, many years, and what they would try to do is to come up with a roadmap of how we could ban the plastics. They used to report to me, I would say, every quarter or quarterly per year. But after about 4 years, I got very frustrated. The reports were excellent, but also what was happening was that really nothing was happening. And in terms of the health hazard, it was getting extremely worse. So what I decided to do was to consult at the highest level, consult with my colleague in industrialization, seek advice as per the legal requirements, in our case from the Attorney General, seek the approval of the honorable members of Parliament and also the honorable members of the Senate to move forward with this ban, which we did so in, it was gazetted in February 2017. And basically all I did was to give a 6-month notice saying that we are going to ban single-use plastics. It was popular in some circles, but extremely unpopular in others, as you can imagine, with such a tough decision. Overall, it was met fairly well, I would say so. The encouragement was this, was that even before the 6-month deadline, we saw many youth-led organizations coming up with alternatives for single-use, biodegradables, compostables, you know, setting up their industries from small to very large. But we also saw many innovative companies that came up with other bags and alternatives for shopping. I would say that all of the shopping centers, especially, came up immediately with the alternative bags, the paper bags that we used to use when we were children. You know, for those of us that were born in the 60s, know very well that the dominance of plastics actually happened just in the 80s. You know, in the 60s and 70s, we used to use our own baskets made from natural materials, sourced naturally from our own landscapes. And then it's in the 80s and the 90s that we now saw the dominance of these of these plastic bags. To make it worse, actually, in Kenya, is we're using them now for everything. People were using these single-use plastic bags for water. People were using the single plastic bags in the absence of ablution blocks. In some neighborhoods, especially in the informal sectors, they were referred to as flying toilets. You know, people were using the single-use plastic bags just to buy, say, a handful of vegetables. So it had now become very dangerous, and actually most of them were also being provided for free. The drastic measures were taken, and I took lead in that, but as I've said, with the support of the executive and also with the support of many of the industries. Was it easy? No. I was taken to court, of course, immediately. And I don't want to get into the details of that, but just to say that there was also support from the judiciary. So although there were many court cases, eventually most of them were thrown out, and the ban prevails up to this day. What have the results been? The results have been numerous for Kenya. It has been that, first of all, our environment is cleaner. It's cleaner because also, together with the ban, the penalties were extremely high. People said I was a bit too harsh, but, you know, for Kenya, that's what we know. If the penalties aren't high, if the fines aren't high, people's behavior is not going to change. But our environment is cleaner. New industries have evolved. Most people, if they do use the plastic bags, which they do, and this is the single-use plastic bags, at least they're dispensing of them. So they're not contaminating the environment the way they used to be. Where do we stand now, you know, as I conclude? Where we are at the moment is to say we still have a long way to go. There are incentives for the alternatives, for the biodegradables, for the compostables, but we're also now working with the East African community, the East African Assembly especially, to also make sure that all our neighbors do the same. Of course, the best exemplar, a country that has been doing this for a very long time, one that we also borrowed examples from, is Rwanda. Rwanda has been doing this for they're decades ahead of us, but also the government of Rwanda was also very useful to us as a center of excellence or a case study of excellence to show us what is achievable. Of course, our borders are porous. So although I would say that in Kenya, not many manufacturers are producing plastic bags, but because our borders are porous, single-use plastic bags are coming in from the neighboring countries. The next incentive for us, therefore, is to legislate this at the East African Assembly to ensure not only our environmental health, but also the health, our personal health, when it comes to doing away with these plastic pollutants, which I must say, as you all know, they last for forever, beyond our lifetime. So, honorable members and chair, distinguished panelists, let me just conclude with those remarks, and I'm looking forward to discussing further with you about the Kenyan experience. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. That's truly inspirational. So thank you very much. And we'll get back to you when we do the question and answer session. So I've had the honor to have traveled many times to Rwanda when I worked for UNICEF. And even 10 years ago, as you said, Ambassador, when you went through the airport, you were told to discard any plastic bags you might have. And Rwanda has been, as you said, been a leader in their anti-plastic initiatives, not only on this continent, but I think they've also been held for it globally. And therefore, it's a great honor for me to now welcome Mr. Jacques Nsengiyumva, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who is the Acting Director of the Environmental Regulation and Pollution Control at the Rwandan Environmental Management Authority, or REMA. He joined that in 2013. He has a master's degree in environmental science and technology from UNESCO IHE in the Netherlands, and is currently studying for his PhD at KTH Sweden. Thank you for joining us all the way from Kigali. And over to you now, Mr. Nsengiyumva. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very much pleased to be part of this important conference. Honorable members of Parliament and distinguished participants, I would like to beg sorry. I still have my PPT here. I don't know if I can display it or just exchange without a PPT. Should I exchange it?
Up to you, sir. If you'd like to prefer to have it, then you can do that.
I would love to share because we have some best practices that I would love everybody here to visualize.
Absolutely. So if you'd like to just share that, that would be great.
It will take some seconds to have it displayed. The host disabled participant screen sharing.
Fred, can you help us there?
It's as if I'm not allowed to share my screen.
I'm sure we've got some very clever technical people in the background. So hopefully he is busy sorting that out.
Should I immediately share my PPT via your email?
I think if you can just wait for a minute, that might be the right thing to do. And I'm sure Fred will do that. And if not, then maybe we will just have to proceed without the screen.
Yeah.
I have to also tell everybody who's listening in that Fred is the person who's helping us technically. He is sitting somewhere in America. I think, is it in Washington or somewhere? So it's very, very early in the morning for them. It's something like 4 o'clock in the morning. So, which we appreciate very much. If maybe he's fallen asleep again. I hope not. Fred, can I just check? Are you there? Are you hearing us? I'm wondering if you would mind if you could just proceed, and we will try and get in touch with him, and then in the meantime you can proceed, and then if we can get him to screen share, then we can go over that way. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, moderator.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I can go ahead without my PPT.
Thank you.
I think much of my background has been highlighted by the previous presenter. The global concern of plastic waste is a reality, is not a hidden substance. I think.
Can I interrupt? If you'd like to share that now, you should be able to share it. Sorry, I didn't want you to go too long and then interrupt you, and then you have to find your spot in your presentation.
Let me try to share my presentation. Here I am.
There we go. Thank you very much.
Shared?
It is. We can see it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And sorry for this unexpected delay. I'm presenting on behalf of Rwanda, and I'm from Rwanda Environment Management Authority, as the moderator introduced me. it is a great pleasure for me to share with you the experience of Rwanda in this battle against plastic waste. As has been introduced by my fellow participants, plastic waste is a global concern. I don't wish to take much time over it. If we could share my slide here, you see why the figures tell about the burden that we are shouldering vis-a-vis plastic waste. It is estimated that more than 400 million tons of plastic waste are produced yearly. And most of this waste is from packaging plastic materials. And these packaging plastic materials is something that the community may have alternative. When we go a bit further, you can see that if nothing is done, the amount of plastic materials or plastic waste will increasingly flood the environment and the ecosystem. So together with this reality, the government of Rwanda wake up in the early 2004 and start doing something vis-a-vis the waste generated throughout plastic management. Now, in this presentation, I would be content to take you through very quickly the experience of Rwanda from 2004 up to date. But before I scan that good experience we have, it's good that we share a little bit about the background of waste, plastic waste in Rwanda before before 2004. When before traditionally plastic waste is not part of our waste stream. And this is an experience shared by a good number of African countries. You can see we only experienced plastic waste in Rwanda since 1980s. Before that year, our way of living and handling packaging of our goods was traditionally based on our locally made materials. We can see we have eco-friendly packaging materials that were used before that time. So it's since this year, 1980s, that we started experiencing the flow of plastic waste into our ecosystem. When we move a little bit to after 1980s, all the way up to 2003, we experienced the huge accumulation of plastics into the environment. And a number of damages caused by that gradually and increasing accumulation of plastic waste could be notably found. We experienced improper disposal of plastic bags. We experienced open burning of solid waste mixed up with plastic waste. We could see the impact of
It seems we have, Jacques, if you can hear me, you have frozen. So let's give it a few seconds just to see if it unfreezes. Looks like we've lost him. Oh, there we go. You froze for a few seconds. So go again.
Yeah, internet
yes.
Connection is not being friendly. So I was saying since 1980s, by that time that Rwanda started experiencing the flow of plastics. And we may share the same historical background with Africa, some other African countries, as my colleague said previously. All the way up to 2003, we could see a huge accumulation of plastic waste into the environment. And most of these plastics were mainly composed of plastic carry bags. I think we have a similar experience. Most of them were black. Those shopping bags we used to take on the market, once used, discarded into the environment. You could find them everywhere, on the streets, into the water channels, in the farmlands, and most of our kettles used to suffer from these non-well handled plastic carry bags. In 2003, a survey was commissioned to understand the impact of these plastic carry bags on the territory of Rwanda, not only on the environment, but also on the entire ecosystem into the environment. It's upon the outcomes of this survey that in 2004, Rwanda started saying a little no, a small no, I would say, because the no we speak now is bigger than the no we used to say in 2004. By that time, different stakeholders, different parties came together and decided on what path should the country go towards the anti-plastic initiative. Rwanda said no in 2004, but the regulatory framework started in 2008. This small no that I started with was informed by the outcomes of the survey commissioned in 2003. It was just after realizing how huge is the impact of discarded plastic bags on the environment. The consequence of that survey yielded the establishment of the law number 53/2008 of 2008. This was a law basically relating to the ban of manufacturing, importation, use, sale, and sale of polythene bags in Rwanda. And this law was pretty narrow. It couldn't embed or encompass all items of plastics were encountering into the ecosystem. So after establishment of the law, we started encouraging the community, civil society, PSF, NGOs to start looking around so that we can have best alternatives to packaging materials, to plastic carry bags. This is how we end up having paper bags and traditional made baskets and other handicraft-based products. Later on in 2019 is the latest, we expanded a bit the law and started integrating all aspects of plastics that were endangering the ecosystem. In the 2008, the focus was only on plastic carry bags. And plastic carry bags made in polythene bags. As you know, plastics itself is complex and has in it a huge number of materials. So as the previous law was a bit narrowed, confined on polythene bags, we extended the law and we make it a bit bigger, and we integrated single-use plastics. This is the actual and active law we have that helps us to handle and to deal with plastic flow into the environment. This is the law of 2019. It prohibits the manufacturing, importation, use, and sale of plastic carry bags and single use. Here you can see a number of single use prohibited by the law. They are not exhaustive. We have so many, but I can at least enumerate a couple of them. We have plastic carry bags. We have straws, plastic straws. We have plastic bottles. We have takeaway. We have so many items that are prohibited by the law. And another thing on this law, it's a law in place with a grace period of 2 years. Is not yet fully effective. We've given like 2 years grace period for manufacturers and those who had big stores of plastics, so that they can get aggressively rid of their already manufactured items. With this law, as the law is complex and as we are not yet ready to live, to exist without plastics into the community, we put up what we call 2019 guidelines on procedures and conditions for eligibility to grant exceptional permission. Though we have the law, though we expect it to be effective 2 years after 2 years, we also have that feeling of coexisting with plastics, where we have, in the case of no alternatives. That is why we put up guidelines that will allow, will help, will link the regulator and the clients in this path. So what does the guidelines say? I mean, why do the guidelines say, in case of non-alternatives to use of plastics, the client, any person in need of that special authorization will apply for that special authorization following big lines into these guidelines. I would, in a nutshell, say that from the point of regulation, this is the big tool we have that guides, that informs everybody what to do in this path towards the anti-plastic initiative. When I try to move a bit quicker, I would love to share some challenges and success experienced. As my colleague said previously, Rwanda is now regarded as the cleanest city in Africa. That brand, that name was just because of this stand we've taken in vis-a-vis management of plastics. We have, of course, low environmental damages caused by plastic waste into the ecosystem. We have experienced effective enforcement of the law. And this, for us to come up with this effective enforcement of the law, another good lesson is the involvement of key stakeholders. REMA, the Rwanda Environment Management Authority, and our ministry, the Custodian Ministry of Environment, we do not work alone. We have joined hands with all key important stakeholders in the country, security organs. Here I mean Rwanda National Police is fully engaged. Rwanda Investigation Bureau is fully engaged. Rwanda local government, Ministry of Local Government, fully engaged. Private sector federation, civil society. This has been actually a battle for the entire community, not just a battle of the regulator and the government. For us to come up with this successful move, we had to have all key players around us supporting us in the move. Another important thing that I wouldn't wish to miss is the political will and a strong leadership. You know, everywhere we have good laws, well-written documents, well advocated for by PSF or other key players. But if the government doesn't step in, doesn't come on board and do all necessaries to have it fully enforced, we couldn't really succeed as we couldn't really celebrate the success we are celebrating. We've seen also plastic recycling factories growing up in order to clean back, to take back plastics from the environment. We still have challenges along the journey. Among others, we have reliance on imports. Most of plastics we banned are coming from outside through what we call industrial packaging. Since we fully depend on industrial packaging from Kenya, from Tanzania, from everywhere, we have to be flexible and allow, at a certain extent, the flow in of those unsubstitutable commodities. There is a need of huge investment in recycling technologies with, of course, huge money in it. So this is also still a challenge we have. Lack of enough and cost-effective or cheap alternatives is another challenge we are dealing with. We are also having another critical challenge of smuggling. We have open borders whereby plastics from Uganda, from Congo, from Burundi can easily flow in. This is another challenge. Of course, we have tactics and strategies of handling them. But in a nutshell, I would say it's a journey of hardships that we have to take and cope with everything along. So far, this is what Rwanda has done vis-a-vis regulation, vis-a-vis alternatives, vis-a-vis envisioning alternatives to plastics. This is why we are facing as challenges. This is what we've managed to come up as success. Members, honorable members of parliament, I think this is what I could share with you with my little presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nsengiyumva. That was very impressive. And I have to say, my experience of Kigali and Rwanda in general is one of the cleanest countries. Maybe just Switzerland beat you to it. But that's when you travel around, it is extraordinary how clean and plastic-free Rwanda is. It's now time for questions. Can I just see from the members of parliament, can you indicate to me? I'm going to immediately see Honorable Singh's hand. Honorable Singh, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Melanie, and thank you to your presenters and everybody that's on the panel. I am sorry that I would have missed the first presentation because we were busy in a parliamentary session and it was voting time. And you know, Melanie, that we have to be there when voting takes place. But I must say, and I would think that the second presentation by Rwanda and Kenya were more or less the same in terms of the challenges and opportunities. And I must say, this is extremely impressive what they've done. But one has to note that it was a long road from 2003 when you started to even now 2019-20 when you are still having challenges. Just one or two questions. You spoke about enforcement. I'd just like to know what kind of sanctions have been applied in terms of enforcement. Secondly, the lobbying from the manufacturers of plastic material. I'm sure there has been and continues to be intense lobbying by them where they use reasons like the number of jobs that would be lost, the investment in their machinery, etc., to produce plastics. How did you try and overcome that and incentivize? And the last question would be, does this plastic policy apply even in your rural areas, or is it just in Kigali itself? How widespread is the application of this policy? I'll just stop there for now. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you. Jacques, I'm going to give you a moment to breathe first, and I'll ask Ambassador Wakungu, do you actually want to answer that? Because actually in Kenya, it went quite fast. I know Honorable Singh didn't hear your presentation, but you have had similar issues. And I'm lobbying issues, you know, that you've had. I've made to believe that your US trade deal is even at risk because of the chemistry industry in America lobbying so hard. So maybe I'll give Jacques a pause first and you can go first and then we'll go back to Rwanda.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Member of Parliament, for that very good question, actually series of good questions. First of all, in terms of enforcement, what we did in Kenya is that the penalties are extremely high. And the penalties are as high as 1 year to 4 years in jail, $10,000 to $250,000. And that has really served as a deterrent. And this was not geared really towards the user, you know, the small vendors. It was really to deter the manufacturers and the distributors. And that Kenya has done extremely well in terms of that level of enforcement. And also giving the National Environment Management Authority, NEMA, the powers also, the NEMA police, the powers of also apprehending. It is still a work in progress. It is still a work in progress. But we have seen the results thus far. In terms of lobbying, of course, the lobbyists are very, very powerful, very powerful. And, you know, as you know, Honorable Member of Parliament, they have deep, deep pockets, you know, which, of course, they use. I lost count, but there were at least 220 cases against the ministry, NEMA, and myself. 220 cases, but you see most of them, and some of them were enjoined. So the lobbyists were very powerful, but what we have seen, even since I've been away now, what we are seeing in Kenya is that even the lobbyists themselves are seeing the international trend, are seeing that actually this is good business. The same companies can invest in biodegradables and compostables and still do good business. So the lobbyists, yes, they are there. We're now moving into the next stage, and the next stage is PET, which is the bottles, for them to participate in the take-back schemes. And here for Kenya, interestingly enough, the manufacturers, the lobbyists are working closely with, a South African company, Petco, as an example of what it is that they can do. Now, in the rural areas, of course, it's not that easy, but even the remotest village in Kenya, I can assure you, They call me Mama Plastic, that bad lady. And, you know, this is what she's done. So if you're going to use plastics, make sure you hide it, you know, because of what she did. If you're found, then you can go to jail. So it's a work in progress. It is a work in progress. Like I said, the rural area is not so easy. Lobbyists are very powerful. Enforcement and implementation is a work in progress. Thank you, Honorable Member of Parliament.
Jacques, just unmute. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Member of Parliament. Thank you for the interesting questions. Actually, as far as enforcement is concerned, we have fines and penalties. But we started playing with the mentality of people. Before we impose fines, before we thought about penalties, we started with preparing a good ground of enforcement, of implementation of the law. In my presentation, I highlighted the aspect of synergy between stakeholders and all stakeholders engaged in the business. So in Rwanda, the power is decentralized, whereby the smallest unit of governance is well monitored from the central government. And the voice of that small citizen from that small entity of governance can move up to the highest level of the central government. So what we did, we started by educating people. After getting somewhere in the process of education, we came up with enforcement deterring mechanisms. We have fines in the law, but we don't use to. I would personally layer a fine a defaulter. Why? Because only in the case of smuggling, we used to encounter people who deserve strong fines. But on the markets, what we do is education. Though fines are around, but we put much emphasis on education. And these people, when well educated, they help us encountering or preventing their fellow citizens from using plastics. So in a summary, we have a law with fines, very serious fines, whereby when you are a seller, a buyer of plastic, a single-use plastic, we are subject to 700,000 Rwandan francs, nearly 1,000. What is it? I don't know how is it equated to US dollars, but this is a huge amount to a simple citizen. When it is a factory that manufactures plastics illegally, is subject to a fine of between 3 million to 10 million Rwandan francs, with possibilities of imprisonment. So we didn't experience any case of such a high level of fine. I don't know why, but so far we don't have industries or factories that manufacture plastics. The only challenge we have is the inflow from outside. The simplest case we used to come across with is the smuggled plastics introduced in Rwanda and sold around by simple citizens. These we keep educating them so that they can help us fighting plastics from the faraway borders. But on enforcement side, we have a tough law with very constraining fines and penalties. Regarding lobbying, I think is a matter that many regards concerns big industrialists. Here in Rwanda, we have few industries that manufacture plastic straws. These plastic straws manufacturing industries have been given 2 years grace period. And in this transition period, they are cooperating with the government of Rwanda so that they can transit well and shift their business from non-eco-friendly to the eco-friendly process. What are we trying to do with them? We're trying to look around so that we can find out funds for them to manufacture paper straws instead of plastic straws. So in this period of transition, there is such a type of mutual collaboration, mutual assistance, so that one can move from transition to the next level without huge damages. Plastic application, the scale. As I said, Rwanda is the leadership style is a decentralization, whereby what is done in Kigali is also being done in the forest, in Gatuna, in Rusizi, nearby Congo, in wherever in the country. So the approach is homogeneous. What is being done in Kigali is pretty similar to what is being done far away from Kigali, though the speed is not the same, but the approach, the consistency on the side of regulation and monitoring is always the same. For your information, every month we have a countrywide inspection aiming to ban the use of plastics in what we call satellite cities and secondary cities in the country. This is a joint inspection whereby Rwanda National Police, Army, Rwanda Investigation Bureau, REMA, and other big partners in the business, they come in, we go around, we raise awareness of people on the matter, and for those who resist, we apply fines and penalties.
Thank you. Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I'm going to give two of the MPs chance to answer or to ask, their question. First of all, the chairperson, and then thereafter the Honourable Winkler. Honourable Chair, I saw your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you very much, Melanie. In fact, because of our history, in South Africa, generally, people are sensitive to the use of the term ban. I'm not sure if done instead of banning to encourage alternatives and what kind of support is being given. Let's take Rwanda, where there's no manufacturing of plastic. It means there's something that is being done. Maybe if we can get a sense as to what programs, projects are there to encourage people to produce alternatives, even taking it from history, where the professor was talking about those bags and other things that we used to do. Why are we not having a huge program that takes us back to say, this is what we are encouraging people to do? instead of focusing on banning and enforcement, because that on its own becomes a huge task to actually handle. Number two, I also see on the guidelines, if I can call them, 2019 guidelines, where there's some exceptions that are allowed and some time that is allowed for people to continue using this. Would that not create confusion in the sense that maybe you are bowing under pressure from, in the case of Kenya, from those lobbyists? But I can imagine here in Rwanda, your enforcement is powerful. So are you not actually bowing to pressure when you say now we would gradually do this over time? I know those people might have manufactured a number of these plastics. Thank you very much. Just those two questions.
Thank you. Honorable Winkler, do you want to pop in, please?
Yes, thank you. My question is that South Africa has embarked on a legislative journey for the, to phase out single-use plastics, and we have different timelines, but they're quite like delayed timelines, which is my concern. And the reason that our minister has cited for this is that obviously the manufacturing, packaging sector are worried about job losses. They're worried about losses in the industry. So upon transition in your countries, were there subsidies offered by government, any sort of financial assistance to this? And has research been done on, in fact, how many additional jobs may have been created by more innovation and entrepreneurship in the wake of trying to transition into a more environmentally friendly sector? So if perhaps you could speak to the that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I think both those questions actually link up nicely. So what was the economic benefits or fallouts? And secondly, what were government support or incentivizing? And then, of course, the question of confusion. Ambassador, do you want to go first again?
Thank you very much, honorable members, for, again, those very good and worthy questions. In terms of the word ban in Kenya, I can understand the sensitivities, for example, in the South African context, but in the Kenyan context, it's not quite the same. And the word ban is actually part of our legal language, and that's what people understand. Alternatives have always been there. And so what this ban did is it incentivized the alternatives. We saw them coming onto the market very, very fast, especially the youth. They set up industries straight away on terms of the biodegradables and compostables, and incentives were provided by the industrial sector for them to import even some of the machinery that they needed to embark on this. It's also so that previous industries and previous raw materials like sisal, banana leaves, etc., that had now been forgotten, coming right back into the sector, people buying these baskets, and again reusing them. In terms of the guidelines, yes, the guidelines are there, and the guidelines are repeated. Many young organizations, be it civil society, be it NGOs, be it international NGOs, have also joined in advocating and educating as well. In terms of the power of the industries, I think the next phase in Kenya is going to be the extended producer responsibility. In other words, the polluter pays. And that extended producer responsibility, it wasn't popular when I was dealing with it 2 or 3 years ago, but I know that the discussion is still ongoing, just like it is in Europe and other places. Of course, this is country specific, it is site specific. Now, in terms of the second honorable member of Journey talking, South Africa, talking about the Republic of South Africa's long journey in phasing out. And it's true, it's a long journey for every single country. The delays are going to be there because it depends on the nuances. It depends on the nuances of the powers that be, the manufacturers, and so on. Concerning job losses, in 2017, when we embarked on this journey, we were told, okay, this is going to be the number of job losses, and it's going to be huge. And then the ministries of environment and industrialization did the analysis together with the unions. And we found that, at least in the Kenyan context, the number of jobs that were going to be lost were absolutely exaggerated. We even asked for the payees, what are the numbers, so that we know what to do in the event that there are subsidies and so on. Whenever we asked for the details, the number of job losses decreased. Where, of course, people have been, and this is in terms of the factories themselves, simply because if you visit those factories, you will find that many of those employees have various tasks. And one of those tasks being working on the line to produce the single-use plastics. So the job losses, yes, they were there, but they were not as high as had been projected. In terms of jobs created, definitely more jobs were created for the new industries and so on. In terms of the formal numbers, I don't have that yet, but this is something we are trying to find out. But formally, I don't have the numbers yet. Thank you very much, honorable members.
Thank you. Jacques, do you briefly want to say something as well from Rwanda's side, please?
Yeah, thank you, honorable members of Parliament. I think I can comment on some of the questions. One on whether exceptions are not creating confusion in the enforcement. The law is clear, and the guidelines clearly indicates which items do deserve special exceptions. What we do is to monitor, to justify the authenticity of the request, whether the applicant really deserves the special authorization. Otherwise, we have a list of items that deserve that special exemption, like medical. On medical items, we have no comment. They are not debatable. On, say, construction items that do not have exceptions, over there we have no debate. On, say, food items like meat, like any other food items that need special conservation. So all those items were exhaustively listed out. And when an applicant, a businessman or woman who is involved in this matter, will just formally apply for a special authorization, and we know that he or she deserves it. So we have no confusion with exceptions we have. And regarding project in place or programs to encourage people looking at alternatives, we actually have two scenarios in Rwanda, whereby if a plastic item is banned with probability of having alternative, that transition that we had was to encourage people to start looking for alternatives. Once alternative is available, automatically there is a shift, and we don't expect much loss of job since one has shifted from one business to another business. We rather experienced an increase of innovation and jobs on the market. So the transition helped us to prepare the mindset of people to start looking for alternatives. Once the alternatives is available, then you are allowed to shift, and you shift with sometimes with your manpower or the increased manpower. Another category of restriction, we interchangeably use ban, prohibition, restriction. There is a number of items whereby we can live without. On this, from the historical background, we encourage people, if we find alternatives, eco-friendly alternatives, it's good. If we don't find, we use to exist without, like plastic straws. Plastic straws, instead of suffering from ecological damages of them, we would rather prefer to exist without plastic straws if we don't have alternatives. We have similar items whereby people can live without. So those are two categories of plastics we have. Plastics of which we have to look for alternatives forcefully, without no option. We have to have alternatives. If we don't have alternatives, we have to still be using it. Those alternatives, people have had transition to move to, and that transition stimulated them to have innovation. Some transited and moved with innovations, so they moved with their manpower. Items whereby we can exist the need to wait until we have alternatives. People will automatically shift, like plastic straws and other alike items. Subsidies and the long journey that South Africa has to take. It's really a long journey. Rwanda started in 2003. We are still struggling along the journey. The journey is long, but there is a need at least to step in, to make one step and start learning and being informed from challenges along the journey. I think I combined the loss of jobs, transitions, possible innovations that can be generated from in, and the long journey is for sure long, complicated for a big industrialist country like South Africa, but that goodwill of stepping in is what is imperative. That will be learned as the time goes on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mbata and then Honorable Holomisa after that.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank both speakers, but I want to firstly say to the Kenya ambassador that she was lucky because within the PC she had environmental specialists, and I think that's where she was lucky. But in both of the presentation, I've noticed that there are things that are being done also in South Africa. They spoke of PETCO, and we have PETCO in South Africa that is assisting with the recycling of the plastic bottles. And I think that's where, when there's recycling, there's an increase in employment. And again, in South Africa, we have industrial waste management plans, which are required. It's one of the requisites that is needed from the industries that they must submit to the minister to approve. And that's why, because there's a lot of packaging there from those bigger companies. Although it's not that much plans that are being approved by the minister yet, but it's being done. And then, and when I look in both presentation, I can see that your policies were on situational basis, where you change them according to the situation. But I'm still not clear on the issue of the rural communities, because you say the approach is not the same. When I think it's Rwanda, because when I compare to South Africa, rural areas have got, that's where we've got the biggest problem. There's lack of collection of waste, and hence we find that it's either banned, which causes pollution, or it's either illegally dumped, which is an environmental pollution. I don't know if you can maybe in future just take us through on how you deal with it. Although you say it's the approach is not the same, how you best deal with it. And the other thing is the behavioral change, because that's a very, very key important issue. If you, I've noticed that if communities don't own the project, it's not easy for them to change their behavior. You'll always have the illegal dumping and so forth. Then the issue of the pollution in the sea and in the rivers, I would really love to know how best did you deal with it, because people still think that if they don't know where to dump, they can dump in the river, they can dump in the sea. They forget that there are animals that are staying there and they need to live. And at the end, we use those animals to eat. And then, and I've noticed that when you were presenting, you never touched the issue of separation at source, because that's where we can separate all types of waste. And by the time it goes to recycling, you know that it's clean. Because I'll quickly just say, in Japan, their separation of source, it's clear, and they collect it on daily basis. Like Monday, if it's plastic, it's plastic. Tuesday, if it's cardboard boxes, it's cardboard boxes. Wednesday, just like that. Hence, it's clean. And I'm happy because Rwanda and Kenya are being, in most cases, I know that they are being also assisted by Japan. And lastly, the issue of funding the small SMMEs is very important, because it helps them to sustain their work, if the government is giving them incentives. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I think Honorable Holomisa had to go, or he's gone off the call. So I'm going to pass over to the speakers, and maybe because I think this will be our final round, given that we're running out of time fast. But maybe you can address also this question, the difference between stopping at source, the production, versus recycling. Because I think that's one of the challenges, of course, on our continent, and particularly is that recycling is not really a big industry yet. And often the industry would like us to believe that that's the way to go, is recycling rather than stopping, of course. Who wants to go first? Jacques, do you want to go first? And then we'll end with Ambassador Wakongo. Thanks.
I think always Professor goes first.
Okay, Professor, I'm very happy. Whichever goes first.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Very many good points by the Honorable Member of Parliament. Let me just start from the last one first, which is in the funding of the SMEs. And of course, that's a very good question, because there are so many SMEs that have come up to participate in this circular economy. And for many of them, it's really good business. These are also many of the organizations, be they independent SMEs or be they part of the residential associations. These are also the ones that are participating in separating waste. You know, many of them separating the plastic, which then goes into other industries for recycling, or separating glass bottles, which also goes into other industries for recycling, or the other organic products which go into the compostables. Very, very small, but, you know, making headways in Kenya, particularly in the urban areas. The rural areas, of course, not very much. You know, what is the situation in terms of the rivers and the marine resources? And of course, in Kenya, we have many marine reserves and parks. Of course, part of the education is to say all of the plastic that we use, if we do not embrace this circular economy, we are also, inhaling those particular plastic pollutants from the rivers and from the oceans. So most of what we deposit or we discard on land ends up in the rivers, ends up in all the water bodies. And that's why even the UN has said that by 2050, if we look at the health or the danger of our oceans, is that by 2050, there'll be more plastic in the oceans than fish. And, you know, 2050 is within our lifetime. So it's just around the corner. So there are many organizations that have come up to clean up the water bodies, but most of these are truly just volunteer organizations or the neighborhood associations. Behavioral change is absolute key. And behavioral change is why we educate every day. And that's why we advocate every day. And we're just simply saying, we've been talking during this panel, we've been talking about the journey. The journey is long. The journey of behavioral change is long. And it's one step at a time, but it's part of what we educate in terms of the neighborhoods, in terms of children at school, and in terms of also all of our sectors, in terms of how we behave. Of course, it's site-specific and it's a situational basis. The condition, although we are all fighting and addressing plastic pollutants, the situation in Kenya is so different from the situation in South Africa, and it's also very different from the situation in Rwanda. But what we did in Kenya is to also learn from Rwanda, to also learn from South Africa, and also the other African countries that have also implemented these bans. The honorable member mentioned PETCO. PETCO is so dear to us because in 2016 and 2017, when we were dealing with this, a significant partner for Kenya was PETCO. And I'm pleased to say that that relationship with our South African partner, PETCO, has continued with the ministry in charge of industrialization and also with the Ministry of Environment. Now, when it comes to the challenge for honorable members, yes, we were very fortunate that when I served as minister during 2013 up to 2018, the PC in Parliament had environmentalists. Yes, they had become, politicians, but in their past, they had come from activism. Some of them were very, very distinguished and high-level members for many international organizations. So having such a distinguished, knowledgeable PC was definitely an asset to us. Thank you, honorable member.
Thank you, Jacques.
Thank you very much for important points made here by honorable members of parliament. Just a comment on some of them, as Professor did. There is a thing I didn't mention in Rwanda. through the decentralization mode of governance. In environment, we have environmental NGOs up to the lowest level, to the lowest entity of administration. We call it a village. A village, umudugudu, nyumba kumi in Swahili. So at that lowest level, we have environmental management team. Is a volunteering team whereby at least they help sensitizing the citizens about the matter of protecting environment, not only in the management of plastics. Why does this help? When it comes to separation of waste at source, we are not, of course, as modern as Japan is now or any other developed country. The only thing we do is at least we collect waste and send it to either a dump site at a district level or a landfill. We still have dump site, not so many landfills in the country. But in those dump sites, we have a management system whereby organized cooperatives are handling every single dump site or landfill, depending on its nature and its level of development. And they start sorting out. Of course, it's hard and difficult to sort out plastics out of the rest of the waste from that dump site. That is the best we are doing now. So every citizen collects its waste, its solid waste, randomly, of course, and send it to the dump site where a comprehensive segregation will be done by a hired cooperative. That is what we do. And through the principle of extended producer responsibility and the magnificent work that plastic recyclers are doing, we are experiencing this systematic hunting of plastic items throughout the community, whereby if you come up with 1 kg of plastic, you go and sell it to the recycler. This is also another approach that helps us getting rid of plastics into the ecosystem. So systematic separation at source is not yet in place. What we do is a random correction, gathering, and transport to the dump site. Dumping of plastics into water streams, we used to experience it in 2003 backward, after having the regulatory tool. The case gets decreasing over time. And Rwanda used to experience a severe flooding over different seasons due to clogging of water drainage systems in the city, being the city of Kigali or any other cities under development. But one of the driving factors was also deposits of plastic waste into drainage channels. Now, with that extended producer responsibility principle, we are now hunting plastics, and people are encouraged to hunt them and make money out of them. So dumping is a serious matter. If we don't take care of it, we lose a lot. Ecosystem services will decrease over time, and will in the near future lose even the air and the fishes we could benefit from water streams. So the case in Rwanda is not that serious. It's not really that serious. funding SMEs. In Rwanda, we have what we call FONERWA. This is a fund for environment. So for FONERWA to donate funds, eco-friendly, ecological projects are on priority number 1. When a recycler, any citizen, not only a Rwandan citizen, even an investor coming in with an eco-friendly technology, an eco-friendly investment, has a direct link to FONERWA, whereby he can easily get financial support to implement or to put up that ecological initiatives. So funds are provided throughout FONERWA, and recycling companies, waste collectors, or eco-friendly related innovations are given top priorities in funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I want to say thank you to both of our speakers. I mean, I think it was truly inspirational. We can all agree on that. And I'm very conscious that we just scratched the surface today. And in that light, we are hoping to facilitate a study visit early next year to both Kenya and Rwanda for some members of the portfolio committee to experience on the ground how you have implemented these measures. If, of course, there is such a need from the portfolio committee, which I would guess there would be. I now hand over to the chair of the Portfolio Committee on Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, the Honourable Fikile Xasa, after which I will just close the meeting. Chairperson.
Well, thank you very much. You have done part of what I'm supposed to do, thanking the two presenters. But what I want to introduce is that we also have chairperson of the select committee. In our case in South Africa, we've got two houses that constitute parliament, the National Council of Provinces. So we've got a chairperson, Honorable Modisa, is part of the session. So next time she will have to do the vote of thanks. I've been doing it for quite some time. Yes, indeed, we're impressed by the two presentations. And I hope, as you have indicated, would conclude by following up on some of the issues so that we can learn more. Yes, we did hear stories about Rwanda. I did visit Rwanda, but not specifically focusing on environment. And yes, I could see the place was clean. I did visit Kenya, also not focusing on environment. But with these presentations, I think we have been introduced properly. So a follow-up would be very good. So thank you very much first to you, Melanie, for facilitating the session. And this should be our last session for the year. As you have indicated earlier, so I hope next year, when we come together, we'll discuss about this possible visit to Kenya and Rwanda. Also, thank you very much to the presenters. As already indicated, we appreciate presentations were clear, responses were clear. What is left now is a follow-up, as indicated. We hope to see you when we get there. I am not sure where the ambassador would be, whether I would be in Paris or in Kenya, but we hope to see you or any other people who would be able to brief us. Thank you very much to honorable members of Parliament. I know we have defied the rules of Parliament, so we might be taken to task, but this is leadership. I think we should say, Melanie, I was not sure whether we should continue with it because it then helped us to conclude our year properly. Otherwise, thank you very much. See you next year. I hope you'll enjoy Christmas and the New Year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Merry Christmas.
And also thank you to the Honorable Modise. Sorry, I don't know who was speaking, but thank you, Honorable Modise, as well for joining us. And
pleasure, ma'am.
Thank you. We will definitely make sure that you take over some of the thank yous next time. I wanted to say again, thank you to the two speakers for being so responsive also to our request. Thank you to the MPs, yes, who've been defying the rules of Parliament today. Thank you for that. And also thank you to everybody who joined us on YouTube. As the chair said, it was the last briefing for this year, but we promise to be back in the next year and hopefully then also include a visit. In the meantime, have a lovely festive season to everybody. Stay safe and goodbye.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.